Hello, and thank you so much for joining me for Chapter 11 of the Housekeeper's Diary. We are getting through the book. We are getting through it. So let's get stuck straight in. So Chapter 11 opens up with Wendy Berry and Princess Diana sitting in the kitchen, and they're actually commiserating with each other about how boring the Prince's Trust concert was the night before. And it was originally called the David Frost Spectacular. Remember David Frost? And yes, it had a lot of cultured acts, the sort of acts that Prince Charles, the then Prince Charles, would have loved, but it was lacking a bit of a spark, one might say. And Wendy Berry and her son James were given free tickets to attend in the stalls, and Princess Diana was being rather cheeky and saying, oh, Wendy, wasn't it just the worst? And Princess Diana was saying that she was looking around all the audience and she spotted Wendy and James, and so she was looking at them, and so she was sort of people spotting rather than watching the actual show. And it was also said that Charles had also been born rigid, I was told, but had persevered more than his wife since the whole event was in aid of the Prince's Trust. So the other little side note I must say is I wonder, because Wendy Berry keeps emphasising about the fact that Princess Diana is extremely affectionate and close to certain members of staff at different times, and then she drops them like a hot potato. Now, when you hear how this book ends, you will sort of understand Wendy Berry's resentment near the end. You will feel a lot of sympathy for it. And I'm wondering, this really intimate conversation to open up this chapter, I am wondering whether Wendy Berry did get close to Diana and then maybe got dumped. Because like I said, when you see how this story ends, that could be the case. That could be the case. But you'll have to wait and see, won't you? Okay, so on to the next bit. Then we go into a nice little interesting tidbit about Major Ronald Ferguson, who had made numerous phone calls to the Prince at Highgrove. The Major, Sarah Ferguson's father, held a privileged position as the Prince of Wales polo manager and had unlimited access to him. Because in this chapter, Wendy Berry points out that Charles literally becomes obsessed with polo. He just loves it. He just throws himself into the sport. And I guess it was an escape. I guess it was his way of just sort of letting go of everything and just being really involved in the moment. But on days when the Prince felt he'd played badly, he would return to Highgrove in a filthy temper, shouting and cursing at himself for being so out of practice. And then he'd ring Major Ronald Ferguson on his mobile phone and sort of get consoled. And he would help him iron out his problems with his play. Now, the Major, a handsome man with heavy bushy eyebrows, what's with the eyebrows? With Major Ronald Ferguson, what is with the eyebrows? I mean, I think he's quite a handsome man. But on his book, there's the photograph on his book, The Galloping Major, and he's got these, they're swept up. And seriously, the hair is about that long on the top of the eyebrow, like it goes up to about there. And I just feel like leaping into the photograph and just trimming the top of the brows. Who let him get to that state? That's what I want to know. Because they were a little excessive, let's say. They would have kept his forehead warm. Okay. So now it's interesting that Wendy Berry's son, James, recalls when Sarah's engagement was announced to Prince Andrew, and he says, James recalled how the Major hopped up and down on one leg in sheer happiness, chewing his fingers on one hand, that's weird, and letting out shouts of joy. Sarah had done the unbelievable and was marrying into the royal family, and his cup runneth over. Then we get back to Tigger, the Jack Russell Terrier again. The Prince's affection for Tigger and her puppy Roo knew no bounds. Now, this is what a lot of you were saying in the comments down below, that evidently Diana couldn't stand the sight of Tigger. And this is actually said right then. Charles wanted them with him all the time. I wonder if Diana was jealous. In the mornings, the dogs were allowed to run into his room and jump onto the bed with him. And he would listen to Radio 4 and his talking book cassettes. Remember the talking book cassettes? I used to do that too. It meant, of course, that the prince's sheets, now this is from a housekeeper's point of view, the prince's sheets were always covered in dog hairs and occasionally were a bit smelly. Well, us dog lovers don't mind that, do we? But she says a bit more. Tigger and Roo were, after all, trained hunting terriers who had the run of the farm. Now, it's weird because they would do that and then they would jump into the royal bed and she said eat chicken, specially prepared by the royal chef. Now, I draw the line at feeding my dog when he's on the bed. I don't feed him when he's on the bed. I think that's a step too far. Evidently, Diana felt the same way because she called them the wretched dogs and pushed them out of the way. But Charles would have taken them anywhere in the world. Now, this is a funny story. So, Roo goes missing, and it had happened before that Wendy Berry had actually made the bed and Roo had got trapped in the bed, right? And so Charles comes down all concerned and says he can't find Roo, he can't find Roo. And she says, I could see that he wasn't joking and I had to go upstairs with him to check there wasn't a telltale dog-shaped bulge at the bottom of the bed. But as they looked over the smooth, newly made surface, Roo wasn't there, he wasn't made in the bed, I saw a small pool of urine on the bedspread. Oh, Wendy, look, she's whittled on my bed again, laughed Charles. He really loved this dog. I love dogs. But if they pee on my bed, I'm not going to be going, oh, look, they were. Anyway, I suppose because I have to clean it up. Thank goodness she's all right. She must have been here after you made the bed, so it can't be that far away. Though a dog lover myself, and she was, I was astonished at the prince's reaction. There was none of the fastidious squeamishness that might have been expected, merely an earthy humour, as I started to pull back the cover because she was going to replace it. And he said, what are you doing, Wendy? Surely you're not going to change the cover, are you? There's some blotting paper and soda over there. Just dab it down. It'll be fine. Which gives me the impression that Charles had rather indulgently dabbed it down several times prior to this. Whereas, you know, I would be saying, oh, no, outside, come on, outside for potty. You know, but no, I think his training was a little amiss with Roo. So as the summer progressed, Charles fell into a routine of polo, followed by drinks and late dinner parties. He was still in close touch with Camilla Parker Bowles. And he spent every Sunday night with her, and she rarely visited Highgrove at this stage. Now, I've underlined that because in the previous chapter, you're confusing me, Wendy, because in the previous chapter, she said that there was more frequent visits. So I don't know, she's a little inconsistent here, Make up your mind. So now Wendy Berry said that they used to meet a lot on the royal train, and she says, I was always suspicious when the royal train was commissioned because Charles liked to delay its departure to give him those extra 2 or 3 hours with Camilla. With her husband otherwise engaged, Diana avoided him, rarely bothering now even to pick up the phone. So they're completely separate, okay? Unless it was something to do with the boys that she had to discuss. And then Wendy Berry says she has her own gang as in previous years, okay, which included Philip Dunn, David Waterhouse and James Hewitt. Diana felt comfortable with all these men since they were her generation and treated her like a normal human being, not like a royal superstar. And now, a moment of enormous tension. And it was all to do with the fact that the then Prince Charles was heading off to Turkey. And guess who he was heading off to Turkey with? Camilla Parker Bowles and her husband, Andrew Parker Bowles. Now, of course, Diana knew what was going on. They both knew what was going on. Charles knew that she was with James Hewitt. Diana knew that he was with Camilla Parker Bowles. So I don't think that was the issue. I think the issue was that it was so blatant, that it was so obvious. And I think it really, really embarrassed and humiliated Diana because everybody knew, and the fact that there was the guise of Andrew Parker Bowles going as well. I think she just thought it was tacky and unfair. And I've got to say, I do agree with her on this one. I don't think he should have done this. But, that's just my personal opinion. As I don't think Diana went off on any holidays with James Hewitt. So, I don't know. It seems a bit yuck. Anyway, not judging. I'll just tell you what happened. So, the tension at Highgrove was almost palpable that May as Charles packed up. Charles's, now I'm going to say valet because I have heard that the English way is to say valet, not valet. I've been told that by people that know, so I'm going to say that. Okay. So he packed up the princess things for a trip to Turkey. He was going with friends and Diana was refusing to speak to him. "Diana, darling, can we talk?" asked Charles through the bedroom door. "There's nothing to say to you, is there?" said his wife's reply. And then Wendy Berry says that it was great relief when then Prince Charles went off on his holiday because it was with Camilla Parker Bowles and her husband. But after he left, Diana came out of her room and joined in the day-to-day running of the house. Now, the mutual indifference turned to loathing when Charles got back from Turkey. And they didn't even bother to meet up when he came back from Turkey. But then later on, there was the half-term break for William. And they went to Scilly, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, sorry, Scilly Islands. And they were joined by Charles and they went on a cycling holiday in relative anonymity. It was only a 2-day break. But get what Evelyn, the dresser, said when they got back. This is what she said to Wendy Berry. "It was a bit fractious, I'm afraid," said Ev, as she discussed the holiday with them. "In fact, it got a bit embarrassing at times how little notice they took of each other." Now, Wendy Berry then says that Evelyn looked absolutely worn out. Her dark eyes had rings under them. "Some holiday," she muttered before going up to her bedroom. "I could do with a month to get over it." Oh, no. Oh, you can just feel it. And then this is really, really moving. That Sunday, Diana left for London to attend a concert and she dashed through the back door in tears. Now, normally Charles would come down even if she was in tears and wish her goodbye or whatever. And Paddy, you all know Paddy doesn't like Diana. And he said, "What on earth is wrong with that girl? It must drive you mad," because Paddy always had an opinion. But Wendy Berry feels really, really sorry for Princess Diana in this moment. So I'm going to read it out to you. "I looked at the princess as the car pulled away. Her eyes were swollen and red. I couldn't help feeling sorry for her. This beautiful girl, trapped in what the outside world saw as a fairy tale marriage, but which was in reality a living nightmare." And then she then goes on to say that it's not Charles's fault either, because she said she was crying out for real love and affection from the prince. Yet she goes on to say that when Prince Charles would offer it, she would reject it. So she was crying out for this love and affection and everything, but she was so upset and hurt and devastated that when Charles would try to offer affection, she would turn her head away or rebuff him or and so Wendy Berry observed that he wouldn't sort of try anymore because when he get rebuffed in front of the staff and that, he would just go bright red and get really embarrassed and it'd be really difficult, as you can imagine. How awful to be living that tense married life for both of them in front of an audience, of staff that then went on to write a book about them. It's awful, isn't it? Anyway, we'll still enjoy it. I'm awful. Now, this is a good bit. Diana's friendship with Sarah Ferguson was at an all-time low, and Princess Anne was not someone she felt comfortable with. So she's saying that she didn't have anyone she could talk to about her problems except for Prince Edward. Now, evidently, Prince Edward and Princess Diana became quite close, and Prince Edward came to Highgrove in June in Ascot Week. There was a softness and sensitivity about him that appealed to Diana. Edward was shy and retiring and a good sort, said James. He really liked Edward. And there was an awful footman a gay footman that used to get really drunk, and according to how much whiskey and soda he had, he used to imply that there was a relationship between him and Prince Edward, which would have been fine if it was true, because who cares if Prince Edward was gay, well then who cares, although surely he wouldn't have an affair with a footman. But this awful footman, gay footman, used to, the more sozzled he got, the more elaborate his stories he used to tell below stairs. And Wendy Berry is basically saying it's all a load of codswallop because, and she would have told the truth, I think, if it was true. But he said that James, who was a member of Edward's staff, which is Wendy Berry's son, always maintained that there was no powerful homosexual drive to the prince. He was just a bit dramatic. Aren't we all, darling? But who wouldn't be, laughed James. So Wendy Berry's son seems to have a genuine affection for Prince Edward. And he then goes on to say, after all, there are more old queens below stairs than there above. And he says that they were surrounded, the royal family was essentially surrounded effectively by a pink mafia because there was just so many gay staff. And there was a lot of sex. Both gay and straight, half their like, both gay and straight among the staff, and the whole palace appeared to survive on vast quantities of drink and cigarettes. So it's basically a bit of debauchery going on below stairs. But, the royal family were aware of it, but maybe they're too scared to try and do anything about it. So this is a really interesting aspect of that. Diana had recently got involved with AIDS work, and she'd gone off for an information educational evening so she could learn more about it. And I've got to say, I admire her work with AIDS patients. You've got to remember that when Diana hugged and touched the hand of AIDS patients, and Anne Glenconner will actually account for this because she went to visit her son who had AIDS and supported him, no one was touching AIDS patients. No one. I mean, Elizabeth Taylor also did stellar work. But they were treated like lepers. It was absolutely horrendous the way they were treated by people and rejected by people in their hour of need. And Princess Diana really turned that around globally because she was one of the first people to show you don't have to be scared to give them a hug, or you don't have to be scared to hold their hand in hospital or visit them in hospital. So incredibly brave. So she goes to this AIDS educational meeting and she says, she looks concerned and she says to Wendy Berry, I mean, what on earth is going to happen at the palace if someone becomes infected? And then she says, as far as I can see, as soon as one goes down with it, the rest are going to fall like flies. What a terrible thought, Diana said, whose friends included many gay people. And she never took a moralistic line on the subject. However, she was enough of a realist to know of the very real dangers of an AIDS epidemic at the palace. Yeah. So then it goes on to say that, they're just pretty much what I've already told you and everything. But Charles, near the end of this chapter, he did make an effort. He approached the staff and he said, would you like to join us at a public firework display in Tetbury? So they all pile into the Land Rover Discovery. There was Paul Burrell, Maria Burrell and their two sons, the Princes, William, Harry and me. And it was tremendous fun. We were not bothered by anyone as we walked around waiting for the display to start. Just like being a normal person again, Wendy, said Diana, as we found ourselves a good position. Now, the prince wandered over to the hot dog cart and gave the stallholder the shock of his life when he ordered 10 hot dogs for the assembled party, although he did not eat one himself. He also got candy floss for anyone that wanted it. And then suddenly the air was filled with the sound of bangs and thunder flashes as the display began. But minutes later, bright lights were flashing all around them. And it was the bloody press. It was the paparazzi. Isn't that sad? And they were actually panicking a little bit because they were thinking that the fireworks were actually exploding too close to them because of the camera bulbs. And then the Prince of Wales says, oh, bloody press, as he pushed Diana and the boys away from the small scrum of photographers towards the Discovery Land Rover. Diana jumped in the back and William and Harry took the front seat. The photographers must have been disappointed. The only picture they got showed an angry middle-aged woman, me, scowling out through the windscreen, furious at having a good evening completely ruined by the paparazzi. That would have been a really lovely evening for all of them. What a pity. What a pity. 1990. We're getting on to the next chapter on the next episode of The Housekeeper's Diary, chapter 12, and it's called The Blue Room. And it's called The Blue Room for a reason, because James Hewitt came to stay at Highgrove, and that was when Wendy Berry got her first real evidence of a definite affair in the Blue Room. It's rather aptly named, really, isn't it? Anyway, I'll see you again very soon. Don't forget to let me know what you think about all this chapter down below, and I'll see you again really soon. Bye.